is our church history spot. Now also, PJ is not able to be with us this morning, but I've got his notes so I can use them. And the figure we're going to look at is Origen, who's this amazing African church leader from the late 2nd century. So this is what he's written for us. Last week we looked at St. Clement of Alexandria, one of the greatest geniuses of all time. Today we'll look at his successor as dean of that school of Alexandria, and his name is Origen. Origen's father, St. Leonides, taught him to read the Bible every day and to commit passages to memory. He basically had the ancient versions of the seed songs and was learning those verses all the time. Before long, Leonidas found that there were questions that he couldn't answer anymore, but his little boy could, Origen, because he'd been studying the Bible so hard. And he's like, wow, he knows the Bible way better than me. When Leonidas was martyred, Origen rushed to join him because he wanted to get martyred too. He's like, I want a martyr's crown. I'm going to go and get killed with my dad. But Origen's mum knew that the Lord had more planned for Origen. I don't know if it was Mothering Sunday on that day, but he wasn't listening to his mum. And he's like, no, I'm going to go and get martyred. So she hid all his clothes, and he was too embarrassed to go out naked. It's a good strategy if you're really forced to it. And Mark, of course, we know, was caught in exactly that problem in last week's reading when he was caught naked. Anyway, that was that. That gives you an insight into the kind of person Origen was, that he longed to be martyred. He was desperate to be that. The family's house, in that persecution, the family's house was seized, and Origen had to sell all his father's books to make ends meet. He joined the school of Alexandria and was noticed by Clement, who taught him how to preach and teach the Bible. When Origen converted a guy called Ambrose of Alexandria, who became Saint Ambrose of Alexandria, not Saint Ambrose of Milan, that's the other one. This Saint Ambrose of Alexandria. When he converted him, this Ambrose guy gave Origen this amazing house with a big staff of people in it. And there was a secretary, there were 7 people who could write in shorthand, take dictation basically. And then there were a team of calligraphers who could write up what the shorthand people did. Can you imagine that then? A secretary to organise them, 7 shorthand takers, and then calligraphers to write up the shorthand, okay? And you're like, well, why set up a team like that? Well, because Ambrose recognised that Origen was one of the greatest geniuses to have ever lived in the whole history of the world. With his team, Origen would be writing 7 books at the same time, and he worked all through the night. Can you imagine that? He dictates to one a book, and then he goes to the next one and dictates a book, and then the next one starts dictating. And he would have 7 books on the go at any time, just constantly doing that and working through the night. And it is said, according to St. Epiphanius, he wrote 6,000 works in that way. Anyway, so it's no surprise that when the wave of persecution came and Clement was forced out of Alexandria, the Coptic Pope, St. Demetrius, he said, right, Origen, you have to be the dean of the school of Alexandria. You're obviously the person to do it. So he got to grips with many core issues that needed to be dealt with, such as he was trying to figure out what are the exact list of the books that form the New Testament. Which are the books that the Holy Spirit wants the church to receive for the New Testament? He did a lot of work on that. He was trying to figure out how did the universe come into being? Was created out of nothing? Or how did it all work? What does the Bible tell us? Where's the answer? He thought about hell. Does it last forever? Who's in it? Things like that. The Trinity, thought about that. How the 3 are one. And he answered those questions brilliantly well. And there's a word, that's this word, homoousios. What's that mean? It's the word that's come to be in our creed, where when we say that Jesus is of the same substance of the Father, have you ever said that in the creed? The same being as the Father. Origen invented that word. He said, that's the word we need. Homo meaning the same, ousios meaning being. He's the same being as the Father. Origen invented that word to enable Christians to say, this is what we're trying to say about who Jesus is and how the Trinity works. They're all the same being. And it's hard because, like, you know, how do you articulate? Well, anyway, he had a good go and he came up with that one. And his list of the New Testament books, that was pretty much the one that we still have. That's the list, the ones we have in our New Testament. That's what he said. Yeah, those are the ones. But Demetrius was worried about some of the questions that Origen asked. And some of Origen's stuff was taken out of context. Because sometimes he's thinking stuff through, and with his students, he'd be like, I wonder if it could be something like this. And he's thinking out loud, and sometimes people took quotes from him, and then he got in a lot of trouble. Could you imagine a world where that sort of thing happens? Where people's quotes get taken out of context, and there's like a cancel culture mob against them. Yeah, well, that was Origen. That's what literally happened to him. And what happened was, in the end, they drummed him out of the school because of his thinking of, like, trying to answer questions. And his secretary, St. Heraclius, took over the school. Origen went to Caesarea and started another school there, and one of his students there was a guy called, and this is a super cool name, St. Gregory the Wonder Worker. Imagine, isn't that great? His name was Thaumaturgus, Wonder Worker. Now, I don't know whether PJ's going to cover Gregory the Wonder Worker, but what a cool name, isn't it? So could I introduce you to this guy, Gregory, Wonder Worker? Ooh. You've got to live up to it, I suppose. Anyway, the emperor started a new persecution. And Origen's old friend Ambrose was one of the first to be arrested. So Origen wrote a book called On Martyrdom to encourage him. Origen himself was arrested, and his jailer was told not to kill him, but to keep torturing him until he gave up the faith. Origen went through 2 years of intensive torture, but he only ever glorified Christ more. He was released at the end of that, but his health was so poor that he died shortly afterwards. Nevertheless, the church was encouraged to find that this great teacher had come through such terrible persecution unscathed and loving Jesus more than ever.